On May 16th, 2005, Randy Orton staked a major claim, and it's that he would be the one to carry World Wrestling Entertainment for the next 15 years. He made another minor claim too, and it's that he would make more money for the company than John Cena and Batista combined. Well, it's pretty obvious why we're here. Did he stick to his word, or was he a liar? And check the date for yourself. It's been 15 years on the dot. Let's start with the major claim, which I'm going to interpret as merchandise sales. Now, it doesn't take a genius to know that John Cena has sat atop the mountain when it comes to selling things. He's the face that runs the place, after all. Only Roman Reigns has usurped him in merchandise selling, so I don't believe we can charge this to Randy Orton's heart. John Cena appeals to families. Orton appeals to men and the women that swoon over him. It's not his fault. And we have to take into account that other megastars like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and Hulk Hogan exist. Orton isn't even top 5 in merchandise sales of all time, but he has sold his share. Now let's move on to individual years. And we'll start right there in 2005. Now, when Orton made this announcement that he would be the face of the company, he was injured. But on June 16th, he made his return on SmackDown. He interfered in The Undertaker and JBL's match, and he screwed Taker out of the win. Orton stood at the right head of the SmackDown stage and confirmed he'd been drafted to SmackDown and that The Undertaker had better get used to the RKO and his being there. Orton hit his trademarked iconic pose, and that was that. What ensued was an amazing rivalry that has transcended all others, even to this day. Maybe I went a little too hard there, but I won't spoil anything about it if you're new. And if you're an older fan, you already know about it. Go give it another watch. The Undertaker and Randy Orton really brought the house down in practically every match they had. As a matter of fact, I'll cover their rivalry in more detail on this channel down the road. Be looking out for that. Nearing the end of the year, up next for Orton was actually replacing, or rather stepping in for Booker T in his rivalry for the United States Championship against Chris Benoit. Randy Orton would end up clutching the win for Booker heading into 2006. Orton's next major storyline would be in a triple threat against Kurt Angle and Rey Mysterio that went all the way up to WrestleMania 22. It began at the Royal Rumble, and Orton was last eliminated by Mysterio. Very nice one. Check the match out. Again, no spoilers. I'll probably cover this down the line as well. Unfortunately for Orton, just 3 days after his birthday, on April 4th, he was suspended for 2 months for unprofessional conduct. The man was even forced to go into anger management, and he says it did help him out in life. Upon returning, his next program was with Hulk Hogan, a program I personally feel should have went in a very different direction. Again, no spoilers. You're probably getting sick of hearing that. But it was cool, but it could have been a whole lot better. That's all I'll say about it. If you want to watch it, go ahead. If you don't, then don't. Legend versus legend killer. However, here's where things get really juicy. Edge invited Orton to be his guest on The Cutting Edge and remarked at how Orton hadn't done much since becoming the youngest world heavyweight champion in history back in 2004. And he used this to convince Randy to join him in a crusade against D-Generation X, who had just reformed, as both had beef with Shawn Michaels and Triple H. Rated RKO was born, and they dominated Raw. They became World Tag Team Champs, and they were the first team to beat the reunited D-Generation X. The team lasted through the end of 2006 and went into 2007, but tensions began to rise. Edge and Orton noticeably began to screw one another out of each's individual chances of becoming a champion, and they ended up losing their tag titles too, and all this culminated on the April 30th episode of Raw, where the two faced off in a pretty nice match. I recommend it. It's a forgotten gem, an old classic. Personally, I feel WWE dropped the ball here on a potentially great heel versus heel rivalry that could have led to some double turns, anything, man. But they dropped the ball because Edge ended up heading over to SmackDown. And Randy Orton moved on and he returned to his Legend Killer gimmick, but with a new twist. Now, it's important for me to note that this is when I personally feel Randy Orton begin to peak. His time with Edge in storyline seemed to corrupt him a bit more, make him darker, more vicious, and he was easing into that Viper role that we begin to know around the late 2000s, early 10s. He had programs with Shawn Michaels, Rob Van Dam, Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, and Sergeant Slaughter, just to name a few. I'll probably cover this time period as well down the line because it is worth noting. It's going into the beginning of that whole Age of Orton time period, something I wish would happen again. We got the debut of the punt kick during this time, and if you don't know, look it up. I'm telling you, Orton has punted some people to oblivion, including Vince McMahon, but we'll get to that. And let's not forget how much more vicious the RKO itself became. Anyone remember that RKO that he hit on RVD? Good Lord, man. He almost folded him in half. And I have to shout out Ricochet, too, because he sold an RKO probably just as well, if not better, than RVD did. Man. Anyway, Orton's next true rivalry was the birth of probably his most famous, the Randy Orton-John Cena rivalry. We all know about the Orton and John Cena rivalry. Some feel it's played out, some, like myself, still enjoy it. This is when it was fresh, too. Unfortunately, their rivalry would be cut short by a legitimate pectoral muscle tear. So Randy Orton went on to become WWE champion. And he and Triple H brought the house down at No Mercy. I always hear a lot of people trash the year 2007 in WWE because of all the injuries. I think they did the best with what they had, and they did a darn good job. But that is a topic for another video itself. At No Mercy, Randy Orton became a two-time WWE champion. That's right, 2 times in one night. Orton would finish 2007 as the champion, facing off against Shawn Michaels, Y2J, who had returned, and a long overdue return at that, and then went on against Jeff Hardy heading into the new year. The same night that Randy defeated Jeff Hardy at the Rumble, John Cena returned out of nowhere, and I mean out of nowhere, just as out of nowhere as an RKO is. He just showed up way sooner than expected. John Cena elected to use his championship clause that he'd won at the Royal Rumble because he won the match at the next pay-per-view, No Way Out. He lost. Well, he won, but he lost because Orton just got himself disqualified. Then at Mania, there was a triple threat match. Orton won that. From this point on, the feud kind of shifted toward Orton and Triple H. And I should note, too, because I haven't really highlighted this, Triple H has taken everything from Randy Orton in his career. You would think that would bubble up to something, and you would be correct. But before we get to that, Orton and Triple H would engage in a series of matches, all of which Orton failed to retain his title back, a title that he lost at Backlash, and it even culminated with him legitimately breaking his collarbone at One Night Stand. Put him out of action, and he re-injured himself, too. I should also note, Burning My Light was phased out for voices. I'm speaking on his theme song right now. Orton's 2 for 2 when it comes to theme songs, and 3 for 3 if you count that one night where he used This Fire Burns back in 2006. Upon returning, or beginning to hint toward his return from the legitimate injury, Orton was phasing into the Viper we came to know in 2009, the top heel in the company, arguably next to Edge. For some reason, he targeted CM Punk. He just didn't like him. He thought he was pathetic. And Orton truly believed Punk was a fluke. And he had his newly formed stable, Legacy, take Punk out at Unforgiven. Remember that because it serves a purpose about 3 years from this point. Heading into 2009, arguably the greatest year of Orton's career and definitely at the height of his powers, his absolute peak, a fully primed Randy Orton, he began a feud with the McMahons, and that's when you know you've made it. Just ask Stone Cold. This is that whole thing, like the whole IED Randy Orton. He punted Vince, RKO'd Stephanie, rekindled the rivalry with Triple H. Bit of a letdown at WrestleMania, but they tried to make up for it after. The point I'm trying to make, though, is that Orton, his entire master plan was to draw out the man that had taken everything from him over the course of his career, Triple H. It ultimately culminated in Orton winning a 3 Stages of Hell match and securing the WWE Championship. And over the next 4 months, he would trade it with John Cena. And the resuming of the rivalry ended with Orton being ousted out of the title picture. His next feud would be with Kofi Kingston, and you guys already know this one. It had that whole stupid moment, which culminated in a very long payoff many years later, but we'll get to that. Orton didn't really do too much more in 2009. I mean, he lost Superstar of the Year to John Cena, which I personally believe Orton should have won, but I mean, hey, like, it's just my opinion, right? Now we move on to 2010. And this year saw Orton turn, I'm going to say tween, not face, because the legacy turned on him and people started cheering for him, but he was still the Viper. I think that's Randy Orton at his best, too. A heel Orton, or at least acting like a heel, just being a tweener, man. Don't make him a face. Let me stop ranting. His next feud would be with Edge, who tried to rekindle Rated RKO. Orton rejected him. And they had a match at Over the Limit, but unfortunately Orton was legitimately injured. And once again, a Randy Orton and Edge rivalry was ruined by something. Around this time, the Nexus came into the picture too. Orton regained the WWE Championship at Night of Champions in the 6-pack challenge match, but eventually lost it to The Miz, who cashed in his Money in the Bank contract. Now, me personally, I don't feel The Miz is ready for this yet. I think he is now, though. Have you guys been watching WWE? Watching The Miz? He is truly awesome now. He should be WWE champion now. And it's off to 2011 we go. Now, the Nexus, who I personally find very overrated, had some issues, and there was now a new Nexus helmed by CM Punk. Now, remember what I told you about Unforgiven back in 2008 when Legacy took Punk out. Punk wanted revenge. At Elimination Chamber, Orton was the first man eliminated by Punk. And side note, I was at this event. I just want to flex a little bit on that. Their rivalry culminated at WrestleMania, where Orton ended CM Punk with a mid-air RKO. Now, we know Punk went on to do some great things in 2011, but so did Orton. He got drafted to SmackDown, and he had a great program with Christian. That match they had for the World Heavyweight Championship on SmackDown, man, give that a look. I won't spoil anything for it. Maybe you already know. Maybe you can predict how it ended, but that was awesome. And I believe their feud went all the way up to August. Christian turned heel too. He was in that whole one more match phase. But then Orton moved on to Mark Henry. He never lost the title to Christian. He kept it. Mark Henry was in that Hall of Pain run. It was awesome. Orton dropped the title to him. Orton moved on to Cody Rhodes. And there was that street fight they had where Orton destroyed Rhodes. He was bloody and everything. Wow, that was pretty epic for the PG era. And Orton would end the year with a feud against Wade Barrett. Heading into 2012, Orton was recovering from injury, and he returned, and he ended their feud in a no disqualification match. Daniel Bryan ended up costing Orton his place in the Elimination Chamber match that year after concussing him with a shot from the title. Kane came into the picture, and ultimately Daniel Bryan would best Orton again in a Beat the Clock challenge to determine the number one contender for the WWE Championship. Now remember, Daniel Bryan and Randy Orton in the next year. Unfortunately for Orton, he'd be suspended for 2 months for his second violation of the wellness program. He returned before the year ended, but didn't really do too much of note. I mean, he engaged the Shield in a bit of a rivalry, but the Shield was still on the come up. They were like those hounds of justice before they all went their separate ways and became a lot cooler. Now we're going to move to 2013, and this is a huge one, probably his biggest year since 2009, and definitely one of the best years in WWE this past decade. I'm going to talk about everything of note in this year, though. He won the Money in the Bank contract, right? Okay. At SummerSlam, now remember what I told you about Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan beat John Cena clean in the middle of the ring for the WWE Championship. Cena had to leave for surgery. Bryan out wrestled him. He won. Orton comes out, flexes his Money in the Bank briefcase, but then leaves. Triple H turns, pedigrees D-Bry. Orton cashes in. They form the Authority. You know the rest. We'll definitely cover this in more detail down the line, too. It's worth it. This all culminated, for Daniel Bryan at least, in 2014 at WrestleMania 30. Batista come back. He, Orton, and Bryan had a triple threat match in the main event at WrestleMania 30. And Daniel Bryan became the WWE World Heavyweight Champion. Now, of course, I kind of glossed over the whole TLC title unification between Orton and Cena. I'll cover that some other time, too. I know you're probably getting sick of hearing that, but come on, you got me. Anyway, 2014, Orton's no longer champ. Evolution reformed to take on the Shield, and they ultimately lost to the Hounds of Justice, which, of course, also led to Batista leaving. Something that really grinds my gears. Daniel Bryan fans ruined Batista's comeback, man. Come on. His next major feud was against Seth Rollins when Orton was kind of ousted by the Authority, turned face, started beasting on Seth Rollins. That was pretty cool. Now we'll move on to 2015. They had a great match at WrestleMania 31 that had that awesome curb stomp into an RKO. Man, if you haven't seen that, you're missing out. Go just take a look at that moment. You don't even have to watch the full match. Despite that major L that night for Rollins too, he became champ because he cashed in his Money in the Bank contract, entering the Brock Lesnar in a Roman Reigns match. Let's move on to 2016. We finally got something we should have had many years before. Randy Orton versus Brock Lesnar. Happened at SummerSlam. Kind of a letdown, not going to lie. Would have been better if Lesnar never left back in 2004 when the both of them were young. You know, like, and Lesnar didn't just only have squash matches. You know, I'm beating a dead horse there. You guys get it. But just imagine a 2007 to 2009 Randy Orton against 2003 Brock Lesnar. Just imagine. But this ain't a one-if video. The only other thing of note in 2016 is the resuming of his feud with Bray Wyatt, and that carried over into 2017. And if I'm not mistaken, that's where we got that awesome spot where Orton burned down the Wyatt compound and he did this famous pose. And that might have been the birth of the Fiend there, too. Some people believe it, but it's just headcanon. Orton won the Royal Rumble in this year, but did it really pay off? Of course it paid off. Randy Orton beat Bray Wyatt for the WWE Championship at WrestleMania 33. And here's where things go a bit downhill. His next feud was against Jinder Mahal. I won't talk too much about this one. Maybe you enjoyed it, maybe you didn't. We're going to move on to 2018 now. Pretty significant moment was Randy Orton winning the United States Championship this year from Bobby Roode. That was huge. If I'm not mistaken, that made him a Grand Slam champion. I don't know. I'll have to fact check that. But Orton also re-engaged Jeff Hardy in the feud this year, and that's where we got that brutal ear spot. Look that up. I promise you it's worth your time. There wasn't really too much more in 2018. Off to 2019. First feud of the year was AJ Styles. That began at Elimination Chamber. But the big one from this year is the revival of the Kofi Kingston rivalry. Now, remember I told you to remember what happened with the stupid where Kingston's push was stopped by Orton. Well, it paid off here. Orton put him over. And Kingston eventually became WWE champion too. Now it's off to the present. Welcome. Good to see you again. This year, we've seen Randy Orton rekindle his rated RKO roots with Edge, who returned at the Royal Rumble this past year and eliminated Randy. Man, has it really been 9 years? Wow. I can confirm that Orton and Edge had one of the best matches at WrestleMania 36. It was dope. Seriously, give it a look. And in my opinion, at least night 2 of WrestleMania 36 was awesome because I've heard a lot of hate. I think it was better not to have a live crowd. That's just me. Unfortunately, the coronavirus has really hindered the way life is moving right now. It stopped all sports for the most part. But I can tell you, as of right now, Orton just challenged Edge to another match coming up. So that's where he stands as of right now. With all that being said, and the years counted down, let's tally the accolades. Randy won the WWE Championship 9 times, and this includes the unified version introduced at TLC in 2013. He won the World Heavyweight Championship 3 times, the United States Championship once, the World Tag Titles once with Edge, and the SmackDown Tag Titles with the Wyatts once. He won the Royal Rumble twice in 2009 and again in 2017. He became the 17th Triple Crown Champion and the 18th Grand Slam Champion. Quite the resume, and it doesn't even include his accomplishments before that day in 2005 and after the current present. Orton's an all-time great indeed. And that's all I got for you. Doesn't take a genius or a rocket scientist to see Randy Orton's held up his end of the bargain. Great rivalries, good accolades, good TV, good entertainment from the Legend Killer, the Viper, whatever you want to call him. A surefire first ballot Hall of Famer, stellar 15 years and much more than that. Long live the Legend Killer, long live the Viper, and may the age of Orton be upon us at least one more time before he hangs the old trunks and boots. Thank you, Randy, and thank you for watching this through. If you're here from that comment I left under that video, shout out to you. I love you very much. If you're just here, I still love you just as much. You got anything to add? You got anything to take away? Let me know down low in the comments, and I'll see you next time. The Charles Jackson. Thank you. Oh, and before I forget, today's the anniversary of Motown 25. I believe it's the 37th. Couldn't let this day go by without shouting it out because Michael Jackson's my favorite artist. And Motown's legendary in its own right as well. First day we got the moonwalk ever, 37 years ago today. Shout out and rest in peace, Mike. Also, happy birthday to his sister Janet, who has definitely grown beyond the whole Michael sister role. Far beyond it, actually. She's a legend in her own right. Happy birthday to you, Miss Jackson. Shout out to some of my family who will not be named. Happy birthday to you, too. Got multiple people. The month of May is just a great time. Peace.